So it was the year 2000, the year of the Golden Dragon, and I was on my first trip to China with CGAP to evaluate a microfinance institution that was being run by the a government institution that has a really long name, that was experimenting with microfinance. And because, of course, it's microfinance, because it's China, we had to go to a rural area. We took a train 17 hours south of Beijing to a place that had a train station, and we visited customers. One of the customers we visited, remember, this is my first appraisal. I'm so excited. I'm finally in the field to get to apply all this learning I've been learning from in my work. And we're interviewing. There's a translator, and I say, so it's a farmer. I said, you know, I'd like to learn more about your cow. The translator had said, she has a cow. Can you see she has a cow? And so I said, oh, do you milk your cow? And everybody kind of looked down and didn't want to look at me. It was a bull. But the translator had said cow, and I didn't know enough to know that that was a cow. And so one of the points that I'd like to make today is that finance needs to understand agriculture. And honestly, sometimes we don't. So we need the people that are in this room to bring agriculture expertise together with data expertise, together with financial expertise. So fast forward to 2003. It was shortly after a regime change here in Kenya, and everybody was excited. And I was sent to work for this small institution to help them with their credit. When I joined Equity, they still were doing, many of their loans were to tea farmers. So I went to meet tea farmers to find out about these loans. Well, these loans were agriculture loans, but actually they were funding school fees, building houses, and family expenses. The tea bushes were growing just fine. They didn't need to be funded. So these were the agriculture loans. But then when I looked at the portfolio quality of these agriculture loans, actually anybody in Kenya, what happens this month? If you're a tea farmer, what do you get this month? The tea bonus, right? And that tea bonus is how those loans got repaid often. And you get a little bit of money each month, and then you get the tea bonus, and then the bank collects their money from that tea bonus. But the IT system at the time couldn't track that. So every tea loan looked like it was in bad portfolio quality. It was overdue, even though everyone in the bank knew the loan would be cleared with the tea bonus. So information systems also need to understand agriculture and how it works so that it can be fit for purpose to do agriculture finance. So fast forward to 2008, and I joined the Gates Foundation. Stuart and I unfortunately never overlapped there, but I joined right before the financial crisis. And we had just presented a new strategy for financial services for the poor. And in that strategy, we were really excited because we wanted to have a collaboration between agriculture and finance. And for those of you who don't know the Gates Foundation, often many of the strategies are a little bit siloed and focused on, very focused on their strategies, but not necessarily overlapping. Well, when the financial crisis hit, the endowment went down and every team was asked to reduce their budgets. Guess what got hit? The collaboration with the agriculture team, because it wasn't at the top of the priority list. Well, we were doing financial services for low-income people, so of course we still did agriculture finance, but we just didn't have that same collaboration. So a couple of the projects that I got to work on while I was at the Gates Foundation, one was in Malawi, working with a bank who was working with farmers. I had the privilege of actually accompanying Melinda to go and visit that bank. At the time, it was less about how do we finance farmers, it was how do we even reach them? It's so expensive to get to these rural areas. And so this particular bank was leveraging a truck, to drive into rural areas so that farmers could deposit and withdraw from their bank accounts. Here we now have bank agents and all of that. Bank agents kind of existed in Malawi, but they were only allowed to cash out, not cash in. Because the shops were like, I got a lot of cash. I don't mind dispersing cash, but I don't want any more. I'm not gonna take deposits. I also worked with a bank in Ghana. I decided to wear my Ghanaian jacket, who was trying to do agriculture finance. And they were trying to decide, how do we reach farmers with finance? It's kind of hard. Nobody really understands the risks. And our loan officers don't understand agriculture. They were kind of like me back in that China story, right? So this bank created a model farm. and brought the loan officers to learn about ag. And they were like, this cassava is the local cassava, you can't sell it, do not finance this cassava. This cassava is commercial and it will earn this. And you could look at them side by side, they look similar, but it takes a bit of expertise to understand the difference. And what this bank learned was that it was easier to take finance people and teach them enough about ag to finance it than it was to take an agricultural expert and try to teach them how to do credit assessment and maybe use AI to do credit scoring and all of those things. Fast forward to 2014, when I joined FSD Kenya, actually on secondment again from the Gates Foundation. And one of my very first projects was to work on a mango value chain project, taking human-centered design and business modeling to try to figure out how do we really figure out how to finance this mango value chain. We had some good ideas, we tried to do some things, but to be honest, we didn't quite crack that. And then I joined AgriFin's Advisory Council. And FSD Kenya has been proud to be a partner with AgriFin since the beginning, really, where we could bring our financial sector expertise and collaborate with what AgriFin was doing. We often worked in policy areas, which is an area they haven't worked at as much. And I think I've joined almost every ale. I've always thought we missed a trick. I feel like we should support sorghum farmers and have a signature ale that we could enjoy at the end of the day. But seriously, the most important letter in that is the learning. And that is something AgriFin has built its reputation on and built its credibility on. Because they don't just learn, but they share that learning with people who might not otherwise hear it. And that learning has led to action over and over again. So today, what are we talking about? We're talking about unlocking that dormant capital that we heard about from Sieka. If these walls could talk, they could tell a lot of stories. But one of the stories they could tell is a panel that I sat on, very similar to this, talking about domestic capital and why we can't unlock domestic capital here in Kenya. And I will never forget somebody saying, I went to 10 banks and tried to get them to lend me money. And they all laughed me out of the room because I was in agriculture or I was doing something. And they were like, you don't have security, you don't have collateral, I'm not gonna lend to you. And so the same problems that farmers face in trying to convince financiers to finance a risky, uncertain business is the same problem that innovators face when they're trying to raise the right kind of domestic, low-cost, patient capital that can fund innovations in agriculture. At FSD Kenya, we're obsessed with financial health, which might be why I got poached for my next job. And farmers are experts in financial health, not because they are financially healthy, but because they have to be. We define financial health as learning how to manage day-to-day, deal with risk, and invest in the future. Farmers are actually able to manage day-to-day better than many others. During COVID, we saw that farmers were able to eat from their farms in ways that people in the urban areas weren't. However, when they had a shock of the urban family members and friends coming to their farm, there wasn't enough food for everybody to go around. Risks are serious business for farmers and for farming enterprises. If you haven't checked out the decks over there, you can see that the box of bugs. That is the kind of risks that farmers are facing all the time. And we need creative solutions to help them deal with the risks like that and do it in creative ways that protect the environment that farmers are going to need. You know, Stuart was talking about 20 years, but we're talking about the rest of our lives. We have to protect the earth if we're going to protect the livelihoods of farmers going forward. And finally, investing in the future. That is the third element of financial health, and that is something that farmers almost never get to do. They're doing as well as they can to make it to the next planting season, the next harvest season. But investing in longer term, thinking about how to, say, rotate crops and forego some income so that they can protect their crop, these are the hard decisions that we need to unlock solutions for farmers to be able to do. So today we're going to be talking about agri-food systems. What do agri-food systems need? They need learning. They need data from players like all of you to be able to convince financiers not to laugh, but to finance farmers and the enterprises that support these value chains. Asante ni sana.